Have you ever stood beside a closed casket in your best black dress, listening to the organ play Be Not Afraid, telling yourself this is the worst day you'll ever live through, and then your phone vibrates in your purse and the caller ID reads the name of the brother who's lying in that casket 6 feet in front of you? My name is Catherine Marie Brennan. I'm 76 years old. I've lived in the same white clapboard house on Maple Street in Dubuque, Iowa, since the day I got married in 1968. And for the last 9 months, I have carried the sound of my brother Tommy calling me from the grave on the morning of his own funeral. A 2-minute voicemail that began with the words, "Kathy, don't let them bury me yet. There's something you need to know about why I really came home last month." I still play it every single night before I go to bed, because what Tommy told me in those 120 seconds didn't just break my heart, it quietly rewrote every single year of the life I thought we shared. Let me take you all the way back, because to understand why a dead man felt the need to phone his sister from beyond, you have to understand what the Brennan family looked like to the outside world. There were 8 of us kids. Irish Catholic, loud, poor, happy, raised in a 3-bedroom house with 1 bathroom and a crucifix in every room. Tommy was the oldest boy, born in 1947, red hair, freckles, the kind of grin that got him out of trouble and into worse trouble all at the same time. I was number 6, born in 1950, the quiet one who followed him everywhere like a shadow. People said we were joined at the hip. Where Tommy went, Kathy wasn't far behind. We shared secrets under the covers with a flashlight, promised we'd never keep anything from each other, told each other we'd be best friends until we were old and gray. Everyone said we were the closest brother and sister they'd ever seen. Everyone saw only what we let them see. In the summer of 1969, Tommy did something nobody in our family ever talked about again. He was 22, fresh out of the Army, supposed to start at the John Deere plant in September. Instead, he packed 1 duffel bag, kissed Mom on the cheek, told Dad he needed to find himself, and disappeared. No forwarding address, no phone calls, nothing but a postcard from San Francisco 6 months later that said, "I'm okay. Don't worry." Mom kept that postcard in her prayer book until the day she died. Dad pretended Tommy had never existed. The rest of us learned to say, "Our brother is traveling," whenever anyone asked. 20 years went by, then 30, then 45. We stopped expecting him to come home for Christmas. We stopped setting a place at Thanksgiving. We told ourselves he was happy somewhere warm, that he'd found the life he was looking for. We were wrong about that too. Last year, out of the blue, Tommy walked back into Dubuque on a Greyhound bus with nothing but a small suitcase and a limp he wouldn't explain. He was 75 years old, thin as a fence post, hair gone white, but those green eyes were still the same. He showed up on my porch on a Tuesday afternoon in March, smiled that same crooked smile, and said, "Kathy girl, can your big brother come home?" I cried so hard I couldn't speak. My husband, Ray, brought his bag inside, made up the spare room, called the siblings who were still alive. Within a week, the house was full again. Laughter, stories, meatloaf 3 nights in a row. Tommy said he'd been up and down the coast, worked odd jobs, never married, never had kids, just needed to see Iowa one more time before the road took him for good. We believed him. We wanted to believe him. He only stayed 5 weeks, said his legs weren't what they used to be, wanted to rest a while, then head south before winter. On the morning of April 28th, I found him in the recliner in the sunroom, eyes closed, hands folded like he'd just decided it was time for a nap. The doctor said his heart simply wore out. Peaceful, quick. Nothing anyone could have done. We planned the funeral for May 4th. Full Catholic Mass, Knights of Columbus Honor Guard, burial next to Mom and Dad at Mount Calvary. The casket stayed closed because, well, Tommy had always hated fuss. that should have been the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The morning of the funeral, I was in the ladies' lounge at church, adjusting my veil when my phone buzzed in my purse. I almost ignored it. Who calls at 10:15 on the day of a funeral? But something made me look. The caller ID read, Tommy Brennan. My hands started shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I stepped into the hallway, pressed accept, and heard my brother's voice. Tired, familiar, alive. Say, Kathy, don't let them bury me yet. There's something you need to know about why I really came home last month. Then 2 minutes that turned 56 years of silence upside down. He said he hadn't spent the last 5 decades up and down the coast. He'd spent them in federal witness protection under the name Thomas Michael Corey, living in a little town outside Tucson, Arizona. In 1969, he'd stumbled into something he was never meant to see. Some men from Chicago moving money through the shipyards in San Francisco. Men who didn't like loose ends. Instead of disappearing forever, the marshals disappeared him for them. New name, new social security number, new life. One phone call a year to a handler, and the promise that if he ever came home, he'd put everyone he loved in danger. He kept that promise for 55 years. Then his health started failing. Quiet, steady, unstoppable. And the marshals told him the old case was closed and the men were long gone, so he was finally free to die wherever he wanted. So he came home to Maple Street to look at the Mississippi one more time and to sit on the porch swing with his little sister before the road took him for good. He ended the message with, "There's a key taped under the bottom drawer of my nightstand. It opens a safe deposit box at First National, number 428. Everything you need is inside. Tell the others I'm sorry I stayed away so long. And, Kathy girl, thank you for the best 5 weeks of my whole life." The organ started playing, On Eagle's Wings. The family was waiting. I stood in that hallway with my dead brother's voice in my ear and realized the funeral was only the first half of goodbye. That afternoon, after the cemetery, after the ham sandwiches and the Jell-O salads, after everyone went home hugging me and saying, "He's at peace now," I went to Tommy's room with a flashlight and a prayer. The key was exactly where he said. Safe deposit box 428 held a thick folder and a smaller envelope addressed to me in his handwriting. Inside were documents I never knew existed. The original witness statement from 1969, newspaper clippings about a trial that happened while we were still setting an empty place at Thanksgiving, photographs of a younger Tommy standing with federal agents, and a list of every birthday and anniversary he'd marked on a calendar he could never send. There was also a savings account passbook with $187,000 in it, money he'd saved one paycheck at a time for the family he wasn't allowed to have. The smaller envelope held a single sheet of drugstore stationery. It said, "Kathy, give everyone what they need. Keep whatever is left, and buy yourself something pretty and go see the ocean for both of us. I love you bigger than the sky. See you on the other side. Tommy." I sat on his bed and cried for the first time that day. Not for the brother we buried, but for the brother we never got to know. But here's the part that still keeps me awake at night. When I got home from the bank, there was another voicemail waiting, time-stamped 2:14 p.m., while we were still at the cemetery. Same number, same tired voice. "Kathy girl, one more thing. There's a man coming to see you next week. His name is Daniel Corey. He's my boy, 48 years old. Looks just like me at that age. Tell him his dad talked about him every single day. Tell him I'm sorry I missed every one of his birthdays. and tell him the key in the envelope opens more than a bank box. It opens the front door on Maple Street anytime he wants to come home. I played that second message 6 times before my legs gave out. Because Tommy didn't just come home to die. He came home to introduce us to the son we never knew existed, and to make sure his little sister was the one who got to open the door for him. I sat on the carpet in Tommy's room with that second voicemail still playing on a loop, his tired voice telling me a 48-year-old stranger named Daniel Corey was on his way to Dubuque. And for the first time in 56 years, I didn't know whether to hug my brother or shake him for keeping one more secret right up until the very last second. The next 7 days felt like a lifetime. I didn't tell the other siblings yet. How do you even start that conversation? I cleaned the house top to bottom, baked banana bread like we were expecting company for Sunday dinner, and every single night I played both voicemails back to back until I fell asleep with the phone on my chest, like it was the only thing keeping Tommy breathing. On the following Thursday, May 11th, at 3:17 in the afternoon, a sky blue pickup truck pulled into my driveway. A tall man got out, red hair starting to gray at the temples, green eyes, freckles across his nose, wearing a faded Pearl Harbor survivor cap, even though he couldn't have been more than 48. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps, holding a small wooden box, and looked so much like Tommy at 25 that I gripped the railing to stay upright. When he smiled, same crooked smile, he said, "You must be Aunt Kathy. Dad told me I'd know you by the way you hang your dish towels perfectly straight." I burst into tears right there on the welcome mat. Daniel stayed for 4 days. We sat on the same porch swing Tommy and I had shared when we were kids, and he told me a story I'd missed entirely. In 1975, Tommy, or Thomas Corey as he was known then, had married a sweet girl named Linda outside Tucson. They had one son, Daniel, born in 1977. Linda passed when Daniel was only 6, and Tommy raised him alone, working as a school custodian, coaching Little League, teaching him to fish in the desert lakes that only filled up when it rained. Every night, he told Daniel stories about a big family back in Iowa who loved him even though they'd never met, about an Aunt Kathy who made the best lemon bars in the Midwest and could beat any boy at gin rummy. Daniel grew up believing one day his dad would take him home to meet us. Tommy kept promising next year until there were no more next years left. Daniel brought the wooden box. Inside were things I never knew existed. A stack of birthday cards Tommy had written to me every single year, but never mailed. A photograph of Daniel's high school graduation with Tommy's arm around him, beaming like he'd won the lottery. A tiny cedar cross Linda had carved the year before she got sick, and a letter addressed to us all in Tommy's handwriting that began, "If Daniel is reading this to you, it means I finally ran out of road. Please don't be mad I stayed away. Love him enough for all the years I couldn't be there." We called the siblings together that Sunday after Mass. 5 of the original 8 are still living. We sat around my dining room table, the same table where we'd carved pumpkins and done homework and celebrated First Communions. And Daniel read Tommy's letter out loud while I held his hand so tight my knuckles went white. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Our baby sister Eileen, who was only 3 when Tommy left, kept touching Daniel's face like she was trying to find our brother in it. By the time he finished reading, we weren't strangers anymore. We were family, who'd just been waiting 56 years for the last piece to come home. The rest of the summer was a kind of miracle. Daniel came back every other weekend, brought his own son, Jacob, Tommy's only grandchild, a red-haired, freckle-faced 12-year-old, who took to calling me Grandma Kathy without missing a beat. We planted a new lilac bush where the old porch swing used to be, the one Tommy and I wore smooth when we were kids. We hung Daniel's graduation picture next to the old family photos in the hallway. So Tommy's smile is there twice now, once at 25 and once through his son at 18. We even took a road trip to Tucson in September, all of us crammed into 2 cars like we were 20 again, and stood in the little cemetery where Linda rests, left flowers and a note that said, "Thank you for taking care of our brother when we couldn't." Some nights, I still play those 2 voicemails, Tommy's voice sounding farther away every time. But now when the second one ends and he says, "Tell him the key opens the front door on Maple Street anytime he wants to come home," I smile through the tears because the door has been wide open ever since Daniel walked through it. Last week, Jacob asked if he could spend next summer with me, said he wants to learn how to make Grandma Kathy's lemon bars and hear every story about the grandfather he never got to meet. I told him the spare room is his for as long as he wants it, same as it was for his grandfather 56 years too late. So, here I am, at 76, sitting on the same porch swing that's been repaired twice and painted 3 times, watching a red-haired boy chase fireflies in the yard while the Mississippi rolls by slow and steady in the distance. And I finally understand why Tommy came home for 5 short weeks. He didn't come home to die. He came home to make sure the family he wasn't allowed to have would finally find each other after he was gone. If your phone rang tomorrow and it was the brother you thought you'd lost forever telling you there's one more branch on the family tree you never knew existed, would you open the door wide enough to let 56 years of strangers walk in and sit down at your table like they'd always belong there? Because every time that screen door creaks now, I look up expecting to see Tommy standing there with his duffel bag and that crooked grin saying, "Kathy girl, told you I'd bring the family home." And in a way, he did. 1 Greyhound bus, 2 voicemails, and 1 brave red-haired man who wasn't afraid to knock. Leave your own story below. Sometimes the longest goodbyes are just the scenic route to the best hello you never saw coming. I read every single comment. Maybe one of you can tell me what to do when the fireflies come out, and I still hear my brother laughing in the wind, telling me the porch swing is finally big enough for all of us. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you're still here, drop a number 1 in the comments so I know you made it. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a like and subscribe for more true life confessions. I've added 2 listener favorites on the screen if you'd like to keep going. See you in the next one.